Hey everybody, welcome to the cartoon flashback, if you will. I know I haven't done it in a while, and I do apologize for that. But, I was watching Rowdy C's Jim Henson tribute, which I've seen before on ManicExpression.com before, and even I think on Daily Motion. And he did a great job with it, so I would suggest checking it out. Go to Rowdy C, Google it, Google Rowdy C, Jim Henson, and you'll find it. One of the things he talked about towards the end, and it's something that does relate to animation, is the fact that many of Jim Henson's projects ended up getting animated stories, or animated shows. They did. I can name several. Most notably, of course, is Muppet Babies. And if you did not grow up in the early to mid 80s, or basically the mid 80s, starting around the fall of 84, to the early 90s, which was like 1991, 1992, how can you not know about Muppet Babies? This was a show that basically was developed and was brought about because of the positive response to a what-if scene or dream sequence, by what if flashback sequence, dream sequence, whatever you want to call it, by Miss Piggy in The Muppets Take Manhattan, imagining the what it would have been had her, Kermit, and the others grew up as babies. The positive response to that, sequence in Muppets Take Manhattan made Jim Henson realize that he had a hit on his hands and decided to go with the Muppet Babies, which became one of the longest standing Saturday morning cartoons throughout the 80s and the early portion of the 90s for CBS. It was the one show that no matter how old you were, or no matter what else was on at its time slot, you tuned into CBS to watch the Muppet Babies. Now, Muppet Babies would integrate later on to other parts of the Disney Channel when Disney bought the rights to the Muppets the first time back in the early to mid 90s. So they would end up on things like Disney Channel and later on Playhouse Disney. They did. But they would also end up elsewhere. There were several times I remember Nickelodeon had them. So Muppet Babies was around for a while. Unfortunately, you can't really see Muppet Babies anymore unless you try really hard to find it here on YouTube, Daily Motion, or wherever. Because unfortunately, Muppet Babies was one of those shows that definitely played upon what a lot of us as kids growing up, always liked to use, and that was our imagination. But they took it to another level. They let their imaginations visually be seen to the point that a lot of stock footage, copyrighted footage from movies to television shows were used. A lot of this footage is by other studios that Disney nowadays would have to pay out the you-know-what just to get the rights for a one-time release or complete series release of the Muppet Babies on DVD. Yeah, Disney and Jim Henson Productions would literally have to pay out the rear just to get the one-time exclusive, one-time licensing to distribute the Muppet Babies as a complete series on DVD. The only way you could get the Muppet Babies now in any kind of DVD format is through places like iOffer, in which many people that I've actually done business with will and have recorded the complete series onto DVD. But that isn't all. You see, even though the Muppet Babies is the longest standing one, Jim didn't stop there. He actually continued on. He actually capitalized on that success the following season of the Muppet Babies. You see, around season 2, and I didn't know about this because it only ran for 3 episodes. They added an addition to the Muppet Babies. Muppet Babies became a 1-hour block, so you had a 1 hour of Muppet Babies. But in the second season, that 1 hour in which it would become was that second half hour was encompassed by a show called Little Muppet Monsters. Now, of course, Little Muppet Monsters dealt with actual Jim Henson Muppets trying to put their own show together. But the one thing that helped carry it, even for several episodes, was the animation portions. Because you had animated portions based around classic Muppet Show skits, like Pigs in Space. And you even had one with the Muppets, like Fozzie and Kermit being detectives, or something like that, helping people out like Miss Piggy. And this was in animated form. And what made this so interesting about Jim Henson having Kermit, Fozzie, and Piggy, as they actually are in animated form, is it allowed for more things to happen, allowed for more fluidness. In other words, allowed for more, well, not saying they didn't get away with much when they tried to do as much as they wanted to with the Muppets on the Muppet Show and in the movies. They did. But the animation portions allowed them to do so much more. Allowed them to do things with the Muppets that would be impossible except for smoke and mirrors. So even though Little Muppet Monsters, the following season of Muppet Babies, only lasted for 3 episodes before it became a full hour of Muppet Babies for, I think, 7-8 for the rest of the time frame. I think for the next 6-7 years. The animation portion of those, you just have to see to believe, because they are actually pretty good. They're actually pretty funny. And again, they stretch the imagination of what can be done with the Muppets, especially when you put them in a 2D form. Now, Jim did not want to stop there, of course. Another show that he had created around the same time Muppet Babies had come out was Fraggle Rock. Now, Fraggle Rock was originally a Muppet show created exclusively for HBO. It was one of the shows that HBO, when they first started out, and they were targeting every genre that there was, even as they are trying to recapture that today with the acquisition of Sesame Street. HBO had gotten the rights to air Fraggle Rock, which again was a new Muppet show back in 1984-83. Now, because of the success of Fraggle Rock, Jim decided in 1987 to capitalize on the success of Muppet Babies. Muppet Babies is an animated series, and the somewhat semi-success of the animated segments that took place in Little Muppet Monsters, even for a couple of episodes, and decided to take Fraggle Rock into 2D form itself. And it actually turned out pretty good, in my opinion. I remember when they were advertising Fraggle Rock was coming, I woke up that morning just to watch Fraggle Rock the first time in animated form. Because for some of us, we didn't really get to watch Fraggle Rock that much because HBO, some of us didn't have the money to add HBO to our packages. The only time we ever got to watch the live action Fraggle Rock was during the free previews. But the animated one was on NBC, and to me, I thought it was pretty good. In fact, I do have somewhere I should say, recorded VHS copy of Mickey's Christmas Carol, and at the end of it, they're talking about that. At the end, you hear the announcer talking through the credits about what's coming on Saturday mornings, and then after the credits, you see what looks like the beginning of a preview for NBC Saturday mornings, and the first thing that comes popping right into the screen before we go to static and stop the recording is Red Fraggle sliding down a slide or something like that, or wooden bark or something like that. So that was basically around the time Fraggle Rock was being introduced into animated form. And again, me and my sisters, we watched it and we actually enjoyed it. Unfortunately, Fraggle Rock, the animated series, only lasted for one season. Why? Well, basically, I think the reason being is because it was basically the same show that was being seen on HBO, but in animated form. But again, like I said, the one thing about the animated form is it allowed you to do things with the Fraggles that you had never seen done in the live action portions. Unless, of course, Jim Henson used his unique innovation to make it happen. In fact, I was watching an animated episode of it this morning on Hulu, and you can find it on Hulu along with the live action one. And there's an episode, in this episode, I can't think of the name right now, but when you find out the berry, the fruit, the berry that the Fraggles get sick off of, get mentioned, you have Red, you have Gobo, you have Wimbley, you have Moki, you have them honking, turning all turning all blue and everything, and just falling to the ground, almost passing out, and Red's, holding up, or Red comes up to the screen, holds up her nose, and it's like, kind of stuff like that. And to me, Jim can do that in this live action version of Fraggle Rock, but it's more, but it's more believable in a sense with the animation one because you can do so much more. Now, I'm not saying again that the Muppet version of Fraggle Rock or the Muppet version of Kermit, Piggy, and all them didn't do their part. They did. I mean, they are still huge stars. They're still huge historical parts of pulp culture. I mean, there is talk of doing a Fraggle Rock movie down the line, but we don't know when that's going to come to be. But again, like I said, getting back to it, Fraggle Rock, the animated series, only lasted for 13 episodes. Again, I think the reason being is because it was too similar to the live action show, but the difference was you could do so much more with the animation. You can explore different areas and stuff like that. And what was unique about it, too, to kind of make it similar, but in an animated sense, where you could do much more. I mean, heck, there's an episode where Gobo goes giant, not Gobo, but Wimbley grows giant size, almost to the size of a Gorg. Can that really be done back then in the live action Fraggle Rock? Maybe so. I mean, we saw what they did with Animal in the Muppet movie, but could it really be done on that format for Fraggle Rock's live action? Maybe, but I don't think HBO wanted to really pay the royalties pay the money to do that, to Jim Henson to make that happen, so it could only be done in animated form. And that, again, that's what made some of these things so unique for Jim Henson's Muppet characters, no matter who they were. The advantage of 2D animation allowed them to do so much more. Again, you take a look at Muppet Babies, and there were segments where basically they could probably try to get away with it in the Muppet Show, but not really. You would have to get basically on a big budget deal to get away with what they were doing in Muppet Babies. Their imaginations just let them run wild sometimes. I mean, in Muppet Babies, they did parodies of Superman with Gonzo and Piggy. They did something on Back to the Future. They did, Ghostbusters, Snow White, you name it, things like that. But the same could go with Fraggle Rock. They did so much with they were allowed to do a little bit more with the 2D animation than they would in actual puppetry with Fraggle Rock, even in that one season, to where people still talk about it. Now, one of the other things about these series as well is that Jim Henson, I guess, did try to differentiate certain characters from the live-action counterparts. Now, just like Rowdy said in his Jim Henson tribute, when Muppet Babies came around, Jim knew he had two straight men in Scooter and Kermit. So to distinguish them as being different from each other, he decided to make Kermit in Muppet Babies more of a fan and more of a fan, if not worshiper, of action and adventure, just like any young boy. And he decided to make Scooter a computer whiz. Now, the other thing that he did as well with this series was to bring a new character in, and that's something that I don't know if they did that or not with Fraggle Rock, but it's something that really kind of brought into question why. I mean, this is a character that was brought in basically as sort of a rival BF of Miss Piggy, and that is Skeeter, Scooter's twin sister. And it was kind of implied that Skeeter, in a sense, had a crush on Kermit in Muppet Babies, just like Piggy did. And like I said, they were rival BFs. In other words, they were best friends, but they would be rivals with each other. And sometimes Skeeter would sometimes, when she was in the mood to try to get one up on Piggy, would kind of enjoy seeing her get in trouble until she would see what she did or caused and learn her lesson, and then apologize not just to Nanny, but to Piggy as well, and make up with her. So that was one thing about Muppet Babies that a lot of people kind of brought into question. It's like, why did you create this one character if we're not going to see her again? Well, she was brought back in the Muppet comic book series several years ago to sort of answer the question of what happened to Skeeter. And yes, she was brought back as a grown-up Muppet in the comics, kind of explaining where she went, why she wasn't around anymore. And from what I understand, they did a decent job with it. Now, like I said, I don't know if they did that with Fraggle Rock. I think they maybe did, maybe not. But you could definitely tell that they distinguished the characters just a little bit to where they were similar to the live-action counterparts, but there was just a little bit more difference in personality to really differentiate them from the live-action counterparts and animated counterparts. And again, the one thing about Fraggle Rock's animated series was they could do so much more. Like, Red was always described as being very athletic, a good swimmer. So you could do so much more with that in animated form. Not saying they couldn't do that in live action, they could. But again, there was so much more they could do in animated form that I think that's why they made her more of the athletic type in the animated series than she is in the live action series. And yes, of course, any animated enthusiast that probably watched the show as well as the live action one, but mostly the animated one, would probably say that there was something between her and Gobo, but more so in animated form than live action, which pretty much can be, I guess you could say can be noticeable. Now, Jim also did another animated series based on a sketch, I think, from his Storytellers or his Jim Henson Hour program that he did. And that was Dog City. Now, I think that was the name of it, and Fox Kids was the one that had actually gotten the rights to do this, and it was done in animated form. Now, yes, it started out, from what I remember, in live action form, and then would transition for the story into animated form. Dog City, as far as I know, was the last one that one of Jim's last ventures into animation for quite some time. Now, when you look on Hulu and other places, there are several Jim Henson franchises being spun off or resurrected into 2D animated form as new animated series. Like the Doozers have an animated series on Hulu, and there are several others out there. I can't think of them right now, but they're out there. But again, Jim Henson had a huge impact, not just on the world of puppetry with the Muppets, but had a huge impact on the animation world with his Muppets. When you